1980s Japan, loading status 50%. We've hit the dead center of Japan's peak decade, which means this year should be about as 80s as it gets, right? You bet. The birth of Japan's most iconic stadium, the birth of the most iconic name in Japanese animation history, the biggest Yakuza conflict in history, a celebrity wedding that stopped the nation, vending machines turning into public enemy #1, and an American fast food mascot placing a curse on one of Japan's biggest sports teams? What the? Yeah, good old 1985 was wild. And I don't know about you, but I'm here for it. If you're here for it too, then hey, welcome to Timeline Japan. Make sure to let that like button know how you feel about it. Subscribe for more trips down Japanese memory lane, and check out patreon.com/anikehistory if you love me, hate advertisements, and have $1 to spare. But now, ladies and gentlemen, time for some blatant 80s nostalgia. Ikimashou! Let's do this! Pure Japanese tradition repackaged for a new era. That's what happened on January 9th, when the beautiful sport of sumo got itself a shiny new home, the Ryōgoku Kokugikan. Try saying that 3 times fast. The story of Tokyo's sumo arenas is surprisingly eventful. The capital already had a Ryōgoku Kokugikan as far back as 1909, but it was heavily damaged during World War II and eventually replaced by the Kuramae Kokugikan in 1954. Both of these historic arenas, however, would have to make way by the mid-1980s. The old Ryōgoku Kokugikan was dismantled in 1983, Kuramae followed in 1984, and by January of the following year, the new Ryōgoku Kokugikan was finally ready to welcome Japan's best Chankonabe inhaling wrestlers. The first few weeks of the brand new 36,000 square meter arena saw its 11,000 seats filled with some of Japan's most important people. Prime Minister Nakazone watched Yokozuna Kitanoumi and Chiyonofuchi perform a ritual to inaugurate the venue, while the January tournament that began just a few days later saw none other than Emperor Showa, yes, Hirohito himself, applauding from the stands. It was a grand opening for a grand venue, one that 40 years later still stands as one of the most iconic sports arenas in all of Japan, hosting not only legendary sumo tournaments, but also pro wrestling events, and perhaps most importantly, Capcom Cup 11, back in March of 2025. We're esports now. On January 26th, however, the tone shifted from celebrations to bloodshed. The biggest Yakuza war in Japanese history kicked off that day when Takenaka Masahisa, 4th generation boss of the Yamaguchi-gumi, Japan's largest Yakuza syndicate, was assassinated inside the apartment complex of one of his girlfriends in Suita, Osaka Prefecture. The perpetrators were members of the Ichiwakai, a breakaway group that had split from the Yamaguchi-gumi after a fierce internal struggle over leadership. Takenaka's wake was televised the evening following his assassination, but unfortunately, it wouldn't be the last funeral caused by this conflict. Over the next 4 years, the Yama-Ichi War would rage on. 317 violent incidents, 560 arrests, and dozens of lives lost. What made this war stand out wasn't just its scale though, but how it spilled over into the public. You see, for decades, police and the Yakuza had maintained an uneasy, quote-unquote, understanding. Gangsters could basically do their thing as long as ordinary citizens and the police weren't dragged into it. But that boundary shattered right then and there, and public opinion turned fast. By the early 90s, new laws directly targeting the Yakuza came into effect, beginning a long, slow decline of Japan's organized crime syndicates. And if you had to trace that downfall to one single moment, the Yama-Ichi War might just be it. But from ruining one's future to looking toward it, on March 17th, Japan turned its eyes to the horizon as Tsukuba Expo 85 opened its doors to the country's ever-curious public. Held in Tsukuba's so-called Science City, and officially known by the slightly less catchy name International Science and Technology Exposition, the event gathered participants from 48 different countries who, over the following 184 days, showed off all kinds of cool stuff. robots, 3D computer graphics, and even the debut of Sony's gigantic Jumbotron, the world's largest CRT screen. Getting this massive expo off the ground wasn't easy. There were immense doubts leading up to it. The direct costs of the fair alone were around 85 billion yen. But once you added in everything else needed to make it happen, from roads and railways to hotels, communication and water systems, the total price tag climbed towards an estimated 600 billion yen. You can imagine the sweat on the organizers' brows during opening day. But those worries and the sweat evaporated fast. Over 20 million visitors flooded into Tsukuba between March and September of '85. The expo was a roaring success and left a lasting legacy while also significantly boosting the city's visibility and infrastructure for years and decades to come. If only someone had hooked up a Famicom to that massive Jumbotron screen though. Or I don't know, maybe tuned into Japan's newest variety show, because on April 1st, Yuyake Nyan Nyan or Sunset Meow Meow premiered on Fuji Television. Known affectionately as simply Yunyan, it instantly became one of Japan's most talked about programs of 1985, launching the careers of several regulars, including the comedy duo Tunnels. But the real stars of the show was a chaotic group of school-uniformed idols known as the Onyanko Club. The Onyanko Club debuted alongside the show with 11 members, 9 high schoolers and 2 graduates. But as if that number wasn't large enough as is, the show's weekly Find an Idol segment also allowed new members to join through a point system, meaning that the lineup of the group changed constantly. By the time both the show and the group ended their run in 1987, more than 50 young women had been official Onyanko members, and in just over 2 years, the club released 9 singles and 5 albums. An insane output that earned them millions of record sales, chart domination, and of course, plenty of media attention and drama. The show itself, not exactly a stranger to scandals either. For example, one day a female pro wrestler who went by the incredible name of Dump Matsumoto stormed into the studio, armed, chasing down one of the hosts who had been harassing her over the phone. By far the biggest scandal, however, came when several members of the Onyanko Club were photographed smoking. These photographs were then splashed across Shukan Bunshun newspaper, resulting in one of the largest idol scandals that Japan has ever seen. Psst, teenagers smoking in the 1980s? Stop the presses. Scandals aside though, both Yuyake Nyan Nyan and the Onyanko Club left their mark on Japanese idol culture and television. The reign may have been short, but their influence still meowing decades later. Starting on April 30th, getting your daily dose of vitamin C suddenly got dangerous. That day in Fukuyama, Hiroshima Prefecture marked the first confirmed poisoning linked to the mysterious vending machine killer. Over the next 7 months, someone laced popular drinks with the herbicide paraquat dichloride and then left them in, on, or around vending machines across western and central Japan and even Tokyo. Most of the tampered with bottles belong to Uranamin C, a pretty widespread vitamin energy drink in Japan, and in total at least 13 people died, while dozens more fell seriously ill after consuming the contaminated bottles. Because Uranamin C was running a buy one get one free promotion at the time, an extra bottle found in or on a machine often seemed like a harmless bonus. Until it wasn't. With more than 5 million vending machines nationwide at the time, each and every one of them suddenly turned into a potential deadly trap. And since the poisonings were of course completely random, there was no pattern among victims and no clear motive either, since none of the beverage companies targeted ever received any kind of threat or extortion letter. And so the perpetrator was never caught. The last confirmed poisoning occurred in Kanazawa on November 24, 1985, with several likely copycats following all the way into December. Japan's beloved vending machines would eventually regain public trust, but for most of 1985, they stood as symbols of fear rather than convenience, and as a chilling reminder of just how easy it can be to spark a nationwide panic.
コマーシャルタイムです。
体にプラスなことしよう。今ビタミンは C プラス E。 エーザイの
June 15th, 1985. A date that everyone even remotely interested in Japanese animation should probably mark in red on their calendars. Because that's when three creative dudes called Takahata Isao, Suzuki Toshio, and Miyazaki Hayao founded their own animation studio, Studio Ghibli. Now what the heck is a Ghibli? I don't know, apparently it's got something to do with Italy and airplanes, two things that this Miyazaki dude seems to be very passionate about. But I digress. The founding of Studio Ghibli came fresh off the success of 1984's brilliant Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind, directed by Miyazaki and produced in part by his two Ghibli co-founders. They were eager to make many more masterpieces, and so that's exactly what they did. Castle in the Sky, Grave of the Fireflies, My Neighbor Totoro, Kiki's Delivery Service. All of these classics came out of Studio Ghibli before the 1980s were even over. Since then, Ghibli's works have become somewhat of a cornerstone of Japanese culture as a whole. Hand-drawn, deeply emotional, visually stunning. And even today, their commitment to traditional animation, with little if any computer tricks involved, stands strong in a film landscape which is dominated by 3D animation. I don't know about you, but in my heart, there will always be a place for 2D animation drawn in part by an overworked, grumpy old Japanese dude. Then, just 3 days later, Japanese television viewers witnessed something that they were never supposed to see live. On June 18th, cameras gathered in Osaka's Kito Ward to film the arrest of Nagano Kazuo, chairman of a company called Toyota Shōji. No relation to the automaker. The firm had been accused of running a massive scam involving counterfeit goods, tens of thousands of people, and losses of around 200 billion yen. But as reporters waited for his arrest, Nagano was suddenly attacked by two men with bladed weapons, an incident that played out live on television, leaving viewers across the nation stunned. Nagano succumbed to his wounds and passed away less than an hour later. Not only was this entire incident pretty disturbing, being broadcast on live television and all, but it also significantly hindered the investigation into the entire fraud surrounding Nagano's company, which was after all one of the bigger fraud cases that Japan had ever seen at that time. So this entire incident remains as one of the most shocking, but also as one of the most unforgettable news moments of 1985. But 6 days later, Japan's mood surely brightened dramatically. It was time for the celebrity wedding of the decade. On June 24th, it was time for our favorite pop idol Matsuda Seiko to marry actor Kana Masaki. And boy oh boy, did they go all out for this one. The ceremony was hosted by none other than Nippon Terebi announcer Tokumitsu Kazuo, while rival network TV Asahi secured exclusive broadcasting rights. And they milked it for all it was worth. Their coverage ran for a staggering 10 hours straight, pulling in a primetime audience rating of 34.9%. And honestly, who could resist tuning in? The eternal idol herself, radiant in her wedding dress, vowing eternal love to Kanda. Or, well, eternal as in 12 years, since they divorced in 1997 and Seiko would go on to remarry twice more after that. But hey, nobody knew that in June of 1985, and at the time, this was the dream wedding. A fairy tale event for an iconic decade, and for one brief moment, Matsuda Seiko wasn't just Japan's biggest pop star, she was a nation's favorite newlywed. I'm not crying. You are. In August, Japan made an important step in space exploration when on the 7th, the National Space Development Agency of Japan, or NASDA, selected its first 3 astronauts of the country's own space program ever. 2 men, Doi Takao and Mori Mamoru, as well as 1 woman, Mukai Chiaki, were the lucky ones chosen out of 531 applicants to reach for the stars in the name of glorious Nippon. What does it mean to be chosen as a NASDA astronaut? Well, basically, these 3 would undergo training and research for the following few years before going on to achieve some pretty great things. Mori Mamoru became the first Japanese to fly aboard the space shuttle in 1992. Doi Takao became the first Japanese to conduct a spacewalk in 1997. Mukai Chiaki completely knocked it out of the park, becoming the first Japanese and Asian women to fly in space, doing it not only once, but twice. Once in 1994 and then again in 1998. A small leap for man and women, a giant leap for the land of the rising sun. Unfortunately though, the skies above Japan also held the biggest tragedy of the year. On August 12th, Japan Airlines Flight 123, a Boeing 747 bound for Osaka, suffered a catastrophic failure shortly after takeoff from Tokyo. Despite the crew's desperate attempts to return, the plane eventually crashed into the mountains of Gunma Prefecture, claiming the lives of 520 people. Only 4 passengers survived. It remains the worst aviation accident in Japan's history and the deadliest single aircraft disaster in world history. A tragedy which devastated the nation and raised serious concerns about aircraft safety as a whole. Because, as it later turned out, the cause of the failure was shockingly mundane. Improper rivet repair work done on the 747 had weakened the rear pressure bulkhead, which eventually gave way mid-flight. Now, following the disaster, both Japan Airlines and Boeing introduced major safety reforms and design changes for future 747 models. A rather small measure of solace in the wake of what is one of the most sorrowful moments of the entire decade.
COMMERCIALタイムです。
できたわよ。
頑張る一日、朝こそ栄養が必要です。というわけで、中島さんちは家族揃ってケロッグコーンフレーク。毎朝ケロッグコーンフレーク、ベストですね。いい一日のスタートに。ケロッグコーンフレーク。
Moshi Mosh, it's September 2nd, and the future is calling. On that day, Japanese telecommunications giant NTT dropped the country's first ever mobile phone. If you think that a 3-kilogram behemoth slung over your shoulder qualifies as mobile, that is. But hey, let's not make too much fun of the NTT Shoulder Phone 100. It marked the beginning of Japan's journey toward the sleek, pocket-sized phones that would later define its tech identity. Now, technically, the shoulder phone was a car phone. Yeah, remember those? But you could actually take it out of your vehicle if needed, which is just about the most niche kind of phone call that I've ever heard of. The price, you ask? Well, a whopping 300,000 yen up front, plus 26,000 yen per month just to keep the thing running. So, if you saw someone making a call with this beast back in 1985, you knew they were loaded. Still, the shoulder phone wasn't just a luxury toy. Even before its commercial release in September, it proved life-saving when rescue teams used it during operations following that aforementioned JAL Flight 123 crash. Clunky or not, it was already showing Japan just how powerful mobile communication could be. And hey, you gotta admit, this thing looks at least as cool as it does ridiculous. October 16th, 1985, the day one of Japan's weirdest and most beloved urban legends was born. That year, the Hanshin Tigers, perennial underdogs of Japanese baseball, were on an absolute tear. Fans still recall the magic moment in April of 1985 when the Tigers hit 3 consecutive home runs against the Yomiuri Giants, a taste of what was to come. 6 months later, the unthinkable happened. They won the Central League title for the first time in 21 years, and on November 2nd, they captured their first ever Japan Series championship. Safe to say, 1985 was a golden year for Hanshin Tigers fans. But it also spawned what would become the infamous Curse of the Colonel. Okay, so check this out. After that historic Central League win in October, ecstatic fans flooded Osaka's Dotonbori area, celebrating, jumping one after another into its river, each representing a player from their winning team. But then, when it came time to represent their American slugger, Randy Bass, they hit a bit of a snag, because frankly, no one in the crowd resembled the guy. And so, in typical sports fan logic, someone ran to the local KFC, grabbed the store's Colonel Sanders statue, hoisted it high, shouted "Randy Bass," and chucked it into the Dotonbori River. That is where the curse supposedly began. After that glorious 1985 victory, the Tigers went on a soul-crushing 18-year slump, finishing near the bottom of the league almost every season until 2003, when they once again made it to the finals and lost. At this point, Tigers fans were convinced that this must be the wrath of the Colonel, who still lay somewhere beneath the murky waters of the Dotonbori River. The legend grew into the most famous curse in Japanese sports, and it was believed that the Tigers would never win another championship unless the Colonel was found and appeased. It wasn't until March 10, 2009 that divers finally discovered and recovered the battered statue more than 23 years after its fateful plunge. And while it didn't bring instant success, fate eventually smiled upon the Tigers once again 14 years later. In 2023, they won the Japan Series once more, and the statue of the Colonel was officially laid to rest the following year. The curse was finally over. What a story.
うるさいわね。で、どうでしょう。私のラーメン。
そうだね。
またいじめられたの？すいません。私を弟子にしてください。突然この店を本物のラーメン屋にしたくなっちゃったんです。
それじゃあ今日からこの店を町一番のラーメン屋に作り変える大作戦を開始だ。
私まだ名前も言ってなかったね。私、タンポポです。
On November 29th, Japan's favorite mode of transportation suddenly became the target of a meticulously planned series of guerrilla attacks. Around 3 AM that day, communication and signaling cables were cut almost simultaneously across 8 different prefectures, including Osaka and the Tokyo metropolitan area, damaging 33 locations at once. At the same time, break-ins and arson occurred at 8 more sites nationwide. Until repairs were completed later that day, close to 3,000 trains around Tokyo and over 300 in the Osaka area were disrupted, affecting roughly 6.5 million people, most of them just trying to get to work or school. As if Tokyo rush hour wasn't bad enough already. But that wasn't the end of it. Shortly before 7 AM, 120 assailants stormed Asakusa Bashi Station in Tokyo and set it ablaze. The culprits behind all of this? Members of Japan's far-left movement, Chu-Kakuha. Remember them? 1984? Flamethrower? Yep, those guys. More specifically, this wave of attacks was carried out by a faction aligned with the Chiba National Railway Workers Union, which opposed Prime Minister Nakazone's plans to privatize Japanese national railways. Their message was loud and clear, but probably not the best way to win public sympathy. I mean, if you want nationwide support, maybe don't make millions of people late for work or school. Just a thought.
大きな鳥を。
その鳥はどうしたの？
今でもそこにいて夢を見続けているよ。
夢？鳥はどんな夢を見るの？
final story of 1985 takes us into the strategic and quietly intense world of shogi, Japan's answer to chess. On December 18th, 1985, the sport's newest, most promising prodigy officially turned professional. A 15-year-old junior high student named Habu Yoshiharu. Habu had been entering shogi tournaments since elementary school, and by junior high, it was clear he wasn't just talented, he was something special. Rising through the ranks of shogi at lightning speed, he climbed from 6th kyu to 1st dan in just over a year. Then, after achieving 13 wins and only 4 losses at 3rd dan, he became only the 3rd junior high student in history to go pro in shogi. And once he entered the professional scene, he didn't just meet expectations, he obliterated them. His first title, the Ryō, came in 1989. By 1996, still only 25 years old, Habu had become the first player in shogi history to hold all 7 major titles at once. If that's not domination, I don't know what is. Now this guy's list of records is frankly ridiculous. 153 career victories, all-time number 1. 145 tournament victories, all-time number 1. And 99 total titles. Again, all-time number 1. This dude, basically the final boss of shogi, and he's still playing and winning. In 2018, he even became the first professional shogi player ever to receive Japan's People's Honor Award. Oh, and did I mention that he's also one of the country's top chess players too? Because of course he is. When your name is Habu Yoshiharu, winning is just what you do. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. 1985, a year of many ups, and somehow an unusual number of downs too. Let's call it eventful, and that's exactly how the decade is gonna continue when we stroll right into 1986, coming to you in the not-so-distant future. And that is in large part thanks to the additional support that I get over on patreon.com/anikihistory, where you can find nothing but beautiful and amazing people, including the Hockey Gentleman, D. Fox, Khalid Lepta, Xo Iabu, Sai Kajo, Javier Soravia, Steve Matsui, Turam, RK0, Todd, Hajime no James, Utku Hussein Kaya, Hypanen, Torian Gales, Sierra DC, White Gilden, Justin Down, Yoko the Space Whale, Cats and Soup, Jart B-Man, Ben Herodine, Metal Mama, T-Bird, Tom Erica's Prime, Boo Boo Cakes, JR Horse, Ian Farmer, Tricoat, and Adae Akono. Shoutouts to all of you and everyone else who tuned in today. So I guess I'll see you again next year. じゃあ、またね。